This is the Doug Wright Show debate for Utah's 3rd Congressional District on KSL News Radio.
I so appreciate each of these individuals taking time out of a very busy campaign season for all three of them to join us here on the program and field primarily your questions. And boy, let's pick up on that. This question, and I'm trying to remember where we were. We were in a little bit of a kind of a, should we just kind of, I think we're starting with...
No, it wasn't my turn.
Everybody's pointing at you, Chris.
Okay, I'll take it.
Okay, you're going first on this one. This came from Andrew. And Andrew says, we are $20+ trillion in debt. Will you vote for any legislation that increases the debt? And what will you do to stop overspending and start paying down the debt, if anything? So, Chris Herrod, your 1 minute.
You know, one of the problems is that we no longer follow the Constitution. If it's not in Article 1, Section 8 of the U.S. Constitution, the federal government shouldn't be doing it. And so that's, you know, you can get rid of whole departments, the Department of Education. You can block grant that money. You can put half of it for deficit reduction. You know, I've actually lived through hyperinflation. And hyperinflation, everybody that did everything right sees their savings evaporate. And so we need to address that. It's not just excess spending for departments. We have to address the entitlement program. I'm 51. If you tell me that I'm going to have to work another year or two longer at my age, you can leave those people that are currently there. But I have to realize that I'm going to have to make some changes. So I'm going to work a year longer. That's okay. Even if you cut my pension or my retirement by 1 or 2%. But the longer we wait, the harder it becomes. We have to address that issue.
And we go to Tanner Ainge next.
This is an example where I would bring my business and legal experience to the table. If you're at a company and you want to borrow money, the bank isn't just going to give you a blank check and say, hey, we don't care as long as the check shows up in the mail and the monthly payment. They actually make you sign a credit agreement, and they negotiate that document, and they want to see the financial performance. And the reason is when you step in, they want to prevent ever missing a payment. And so if they miss a payment, or if they miss their targeted financial performance, the bank steps in there and says, okay, you're in default, but if you can prove to us that there's a plan to reduce spending, increase revenue, run a profit, then you can stay in business and we'll keep this credit. Otherwise, we're going to pull it. And in Congress, that's the same thing I'm going to do. I'm not going to write a blank check to these people who've been abusing the power of the purse and racking up our national debt and increasing spending. But if we can pass a bill that actually shows the spending cuts and actually shows the national debt reducing, then they can potentially get some more credit.
Let's go next to John Curtis, 1 minute.
Thank you. I'm the only elected official I know that's actually cut a government budget. When I came in as mayor 8 years ago, we were facing a $5.5 million deficit between revenues and expenses. We worked with employees, we worked with citizens, and we put together some teams. We found ways to make those cuts. And you know what's interesting is we came out the other side of that, not only with higher employee morale, but a higher level of services delivered to our residents. We can do so much better. Utah is a model to the world, to the United States, on how to do this. We must balance our budget. Look at what cities are doing, look at what counties are doing, and look what our state is doing. And we can duplicate that on a national level.
And yes, Chris.
You know, and having served in the legislature, I voted for Utah, the largest tax cut in Utah history. And serving 6 years in the Utah legislature, I know how much those regulations from the federal government hurt our ability to draft a good budget. But I've made those difficult choices. It's not easy. I have a record of cutting taxes. It's not easy to do that when you have lots of groups wanting additional money. But I have a record of cutting taxes.
Tanner, would you care for more time? Or
Sure. You know, here in the state of Utah, we balance the budget. And we have a fiscally conservative state legislature. And most of those members of the state legislature in this district have endorsed my campaign because they view me as the fiscal conservative in this race. And by the way, a huge part of this is returning money back to the states. It'll be hard to get a federal balanced budget amendment, but 45 out of the 50 states already require a balanced budget. So it's essentially a backdoor to making sure the money's spent responsibly if you send it back to the states.
And John Curtis.
Yeah, let me tell you why.
BRT is going to tear up the streets. It used eminent domain. And so there are differences.
I don't know where that's coming from. I think that was our...
Come on, Chris. Come on. Come clean.
I think that was our news department.
Wait, was that Chris's pack that did that?
That was me. I'm going to take full responsibility. I left up the sound for our news department, who is carving up this right now for sound bites throughout the day. There we go.
Well, we've certainly given them plenty to work on, haven't we? Let me tell you why it's important to get this right. As a business owner, I know what it's like to have government be oppressive, taxes too high and regulations too high. I've actually flown around the country working with customers to get payments so I can come back and meet payroll. Our businesses are struggling, and that's who's supporting us. Our families are struggling, trying to support a family and send them to good colleges and get good educations. We owe it to American people to get this right.
Let's move to our next question, and this came in from Randy and several other people, and I was kind of interested how often this came up. The controversy over the years whether the Republican primary should be open or closed, as it is now. It is closed now, requires affiliation. That wasn't always the case. It's been a little while now. And then also, piggybacked on this, if I could throw this in, who should redistrict Utah in 2021 after the federal census? Should it be our Utah State Legislature? Or, as some are trying to do right now, should it be an independent commission? And this time we go to Tanner Ainge first.
As I just said, I trust our state legislature. I think that we can see there's a few years before we even see if we get another seat after the 2020 census. And so, but I think that they're going to craft a good solution there.
What about the Republican primary? Should it be closed or open?
For all of these process questions, I mean, for me, I just want to know the rules and we'll play by them. And I think that either way, in the primary or in the general, you're going to end up speaking to these voters. And for me, it'd be the same message, that I want to cut taxes, I want to cut spending, I want to reduce the national debt. And fortunately, through this process, if I win the Republican primary, then we'll get a chance for everyone to vote in the general here in November.
John Curtis, your 1 minute.
Choice is always good. We're seeing a situation where voters are becoming less and less engaged. And if you look at the process, you can see why. This debate that we're having today wouldn't be possible. The residents of the 3rd District wouldn't have an opportunity to hear these opinions and even this criticism if it weren't for an open primary. So I'm a strong advocate of giving voters choices and giving them as many choices as possible. As far as redistricting, I go by those same principles. The more people that are involved, the better answer we're going to get.
Mayor Curtis, should it be open outside of the party? Should the Republican primary be closed or outside?
I'm sorry. I'm not sure I fully understood the question. No, I believe it should be Republican voters.
Okay. And Chris Herrod, now, your 1 minute.
Yeah, one of the things you'll get with me is a straight answer. I do believe in a closed primary because Republicans should choose their nominee. Democrats should choose theirs, libertarians, constitutionalists. And so, and anybody can get on the ballot. But if you affiliate with a party, then there's certain rules, and I think that that's the best way to do it. As far as redistricting, for me, I do believe, having taken part in that, that it's best the legislatures, because I like people to be held accountable. If you have an independent commissions still have opinions, but the bad thing about that is you wouldn't be able to hold them accountable. If you didn't like the way that your map was drawn, then you can go after a legislator. And so I like accountability. And again, that's one of the things that you'll get with me. You'll get a straight answer with me, and I'll give you my opinion.
Any follow-up thoughts on that? Okay, we move now to one that I had anticipated, but I was actually a little surprised. We certainly had people ask this, but not to the degree that I thought we would. Much of the controversy over the public lands actually has unfolded, especially recently in the 3rd Congressional District, Bears Ears and so on. First of all, your stand generally on what should happen with Utah's public lands and specifically with Bears Ears. And this time we go to Mayor Curtis first.
Right, specifically with Bears Ears. I think that any time you have a government action without a counterbalance, you have problems. And that's the problem with the Antiquities Act. Is it's not ratified by a congressional body. Therefore, I support Secretary Zinke's relook at the designation. If it was right, then it will stand. But if it was too big and didn't apply with the Antiquities Act, then they'll take a different look at it. Moving forward, I'd like to see changes made so that there is a counterbalance to a unilateral decision by a president without other stakeholders being involved.
Mm-hmm. A general philosophy about the public lands. So much of Utah is public land.
Yeah. Well, nobody knows better than a mayor what it's like to have big, bad government come in and tell you what to do. I know better than anyone that locals know how to make the best decision for what's important to them. And so I always advocate for local control.
And now, Chris Herrod, your 1 minute.
You know, this is one of the differences, in this campaign is I'm not new to the public lands. I've been fighting this issue for 10 years since I was in the Utah legislature. 2010, I passed a bill that's credited with reigniting the public lands issue. It's one of the reasons that I am endorsed by the two county commissioners in San Juan County, where Bears Ears is. It absolutely needs to be repealed, and the process needs to be started over, because nobody knows more how to take care of Utah than Utahns. And to me, it's absolutely offensive to think that bureaucrats that are 2,200 miles away know how to take care of Utah better than we do. Utahns don't want to drink dirty water or breathe dirty air. But it's the problem, if you're honest with it, it's not just the Antiquities Act that needs to be repealed. It is all rulemaking authority that has been given from the legislative branch to the executive branch. The BLM makes rules, which is basically laws. The EPA, Department of Education, we need to claw back those rulemaking authority. And
now 1 minute for Tanner Ainge.
Yeah, as it relates to Bears Ears, I think it was a complete abuse of federal power and executive power. The Antiquities Act requires that they take the smallest portion of land possible, and instead they took the largest possible. 1.35 million acres is bigger than all 5 national parks combined. It's bigger than the state of Rhode Island. It's the same size as Utah County. So they never need to do that, and it needs to be reduced or rescinded. And I also think that as part of that process, we should seek an exemption, and I'll do that in Congress, seek an exemption from the Antiquities Act. Wyoming did it. Alaska did it, and I think it's time that Utah did it, because there's other places like the San Rafael Swell that are on the list. And if we don't act now, the federal government could do this again. And as it relates to public lands, generally, I agree, local control, state control is better. And from a constitutional perspective, that was always supposed to happen. And from a practical perspective, we control our state lands that are in the school trust, the SITLA lands, and we get a good return on any investment we do there. But the BLM lands, nothing's happening. We don't get a return on that investment. It would be much better managed at the state level.
Other thoughts on that? So 30 seconds to John Curtis.
Yeah, from what I understand, we were incredibly close on what's called the PLI, Public Lands Initiative. I'd like to see us take that up again and get that ball across the finish line. I think that protected local interest, but it also, both sides were involved in that and came up with some good answers. One of the components of that was an advisory board made up of seats with all the stakeholders. I'd like to see that actually change to be not an advisory board, but a board with a decision-making authority.
Chris, do you have a follow-up comment?
I do. I was out in Vernal when the Undersecretary of Interior came, when the 77 oil leases were pulled. And you could see a 1,000 people that were angry and frustrated because their livelihood was threatened. And, I'm a big believer that rural issues are not just rural issues, they're Utah issues, because the rural counties are kind of like the canary in the mine. They've felt the oppression of the federal government the most, but we're foolish if we don't think that same oppression is going to come to the Wasatch Front.
Tanner Ainge, a follow-up? Okay. I'm going to try to squeak in a real quick comment. So we may make this a little shorter, maybe just a 30-second thought on this, because I want to give you all your 2 minutes for a final statement. This one is a fairly straight-up, plain question. Do you believe in term limitations at the federal level for the Senate and for the House, but in this case, the House particularly? And let's see, if I'm keeping track correctly on this one, we go to Tanner on this one first.
Sure. One of the things for me is that I'm the outsider in this race. I'm not a career politician. I've spent my life in the business world, and I'm not looking to make a career out of this. I think one of the problems is that you get to Washington, and some people, they try to preserve their seat. They try to preserve their power, and it makes them vote with less integrity. And for me, I'm not going to do that. I've always said I want to get in for a limited period of time, make a difference, and then return back home to my family and my business. So, yeah, I would support that.
Support term limits. Okay. And Mayor Curtis.
Absolutely support it. This is one where we all talk a good game, but nobody actually does it. And I'm proud that as the mayor of Provo, after 8 years with a 94% approval rating, I knew it was time to move on, allow room for new fresh pair of legs, for new ideas to come in. I think people can actually look at what I've done as the mayor of Provo and know that I won't stay too long in Washington.
Okay, Chris Herrod.
And I'm glad for this opportunity. This is one of the things Tanner has said as a career politician. I've served 6 years in the Utah House. I haven't been in for 5 years, but I've still been involved in the party. Unfortunately, Tanner didn't vote in the last election, wasn't even registered to vote when he participated. And so I get frustrated when, things that I didn't like the BRT, so I gathered signatures. I've been a precinct chair. My whole life I've been involved in the party. I've served 6 years. And so, yes, I've signed the pledge to be for term limits.
Okay, and this one, there will be no rebuttals because
I'm sorry, Doug. You gotta let me have a rebuttal there.
Okay,
right?
Okay, but we're carving into the final statements.
Look, I mean, John and Chris have now talked about this, and I have long ties to the state of Utah. And I went to BYU, worked for a large company here, started my career, had our first 2 kids here. And yeah, did I have opportunity to go get a legal education at Northwestern in Chicago? Yes, and get some experience and come back. And so, and I did vote in the last election, and the lieutenant governor actually verified that some of that stuff that he's talking about it didn't take place. But look, this is the best place. This is the best state in the country. There's no better place to raise a family, start a business, or just enjoy a great quality of life. And having spent time outside of the state, I appreciate that more.
Okay.
Real quick, Tanner, just last year you said in a company press release, quote, "I'll go wherever there's an opportunity to relocate and devote 100% of my time there."
And Tanner, you did not. You voted in California in the last election. For you to say that you voted in the last election in the state of Utah is simply not true.
Well, I didn't say that. But no, hold on.
Okay, these closing statements are getting shorter by the minute here.
Let's do it.
Tanner, are we ready?
Yeah, everybody had a rebuttal. Yeah.
Okay, all right. So on this one, we're going in reverse order. So
by the way, I'll just say I'm glad to see that John, after just complaining about the negative campaigning, has actually perked up a little bit, and he wants to talk a little bit and do some contrasting.
I've got to call a halt to this. You'll be able to address these things in the closing statement. I think we're probably going to be about a minute and a half now on the closing statements. And Chris, John, since you were last time, you are first this time.
Excellent, great, thank you. You know, I have been a little feisty in this conversation, and you have to understand what it's like to have $700,000 attacking your record when you've broken your neck to do a good job. I am proud of my record in Provo. We have an amazing city. And people are actually calling it the Provo miracle. Anybody that will look close will know amazing things have happened in the last 8 years, and I'm very proud of that. What I regret is today we haven't had much time to talk about things other than issues. We haven't talked about traits and attributes, traits like transparency, constituent outreach, and true public service, traits that have actually earned me a 94% approval rating in Provo, attributes like decades not only of business experience but business success, attributes that win you the state's top award for economic development, leadership skills to solve complex problems, not only in government, but in the community as well. Leadership skills that won UVU's Innovator of the Year award. I believe positions are important, but what's also important is leadership and the ability to take Utah's values to Washington. I'm running a Utah-based, Utah-funded, and a Utah-principled campaign, and I invite you to take a look and hopefully earn your vote. Thank you.
John Curtis, thank you. And now to Tanner Ainge for your minute and a half.
Great. Look, this has been an enjoyable debate. For me, right now, I'm disturbed by the fact that we don't have a voice in the House of Representatives. And we won't have a voice over the next 5 months as there's a conversation about the debt limit, as we're talking about things like healthcare reform. And I promise that if people give me their vote, their voice will be heard in Washington. And I will never back down from the critical priorities of reducing spending, of reducing taxes, of reducing the national debt. If we keep on this path, then there will be a day of reckoning. And I don't want that to happen in my lifetime. I don't want that to happen in the lifetime of my 5 children. And so I pledge to work harder than anyone and pass legislation that will get us going in the right direction again. And it's encouraging for me to hear this. I'm coming as an outsider. I'm coming someone who's going to make a difference, take my business skills and have an impact in Washington. And it's working. Our campaign is getting momentum. And I think that's why Chris and John are now talking about this, because they're seeing the same polling that we're seeing, that I'm starting to make up ground and even get a little bit of a lead here in this race. And so before, they talked about not needing to negative campaign, but now that they're behind, they want to come and criticize me and to try to also catch up. So again, I pledge that I'll represent this district and do everything I can, and I will not let you down. Thank you.
Tanner Ainge, thank you for your closing comments. And now to Chris Herrod.
You know, one of the best ways to figure out, to find out how somebody's, or predict how somebody's going to vote in the future is how they voted in the past. I'm in this race. I'm the one that has the proven conservative record. I've received high marks from Grassroots, Sutherland Institute, the Taxpayer Association. I have a proven record of doing what I said I was going to do. I'm a lifelong Utahn. I first got elected as a delegate at the age of 18. I've served the party. I've gotten involved in the process when there was events that I thought were I needed to get involved. I got involved. There's a reason that I have been endorsed by Senator Rand Paul and Senator Cruz. You know, fortunately, he came down a week and a half ago, spoke at one of my rallies, and he reminded people that we are under difficult times right now. Now is not the time to take a chance on somebody that has no proven record, or somebody that has a varying record. I have that proven record, and I care greatly for the state of Utah. I've lived my life here. I love the public lands, the multi-use, but I also love the foundations of the Constitution, and the Constitution is under attack. I have lived for 5.5 years of my life outside the United States and know how much we need to protect what we have. And if you elect me, I promise I will do everything I can to fight for the Constitution. Thank you.
To our candidates, thank you so much for participating. Thank you again for taking time out of a busy campaign schedule to join us here. We always appreciate that. By the way, for our KSL listeners who maybe were only able to catch a part of this, it will be available. You can download it. You can go to your KSL News Radio app, which is available. And again, John Curtis, Tanner Ainge, Chris Herrod, thank you for making time available for this debate today.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Thank you. It is 11 o'clock. This is KSL FM Midvale, KSL AM Salt Lake City, and we have...